Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Momentum Group webinar. We'll be covering Momentum Academy. On the panelists, we have Aaron Baker, lead developer for Momentum Group, Ryan Miller, our relationship manager, Milan Ball, the Momentum Academy lead, and I'm Anna Sullivan, the marketing lead for Momentum Group. We'll start off with Ryan introducing Momentum Academy and follow up with Aaron talking about Ryan about Momentum Group and Aaron talking about Momentum Academy. Over to you, Ryan. Thanks.
Thanks, Anna. So Momentum Group was started probably about a year and a half ago when Will Erickson and Zasha Erickson were looking for a platform to build their startup kind of app on, which was in real estate. And that's when Will kind of discovered Bubble. And since then, he's, I think, almost kind of really shifted his focus to just building out on Bubble. He came from a data architect sort of background. And so kind of that paired with the way Bubble makes things very easy to develop and bring to life, he was able to, build apps quite efficiently and effectively. And thus Momentum Group was kind of born. And so I came on board in February of 2021, originally as a developer, but having no prior development sort of experience at all. So my background was in marketing and business strategy. And so, I started kind of getting on the tools and learning Bubble, and kind of through Will's mentoring and teaching, was able to pick it up relatively quickly. And after, we had worked on a few client projects and the team had grown by a number of staff as well, we started thinking about, how can we start kind of taking, the Bubble and the great platform that it is and spreading it around to others and teaching them how to use it in our processes, because we found something that seemed to work quite well. And there's a lot of kind of courses out there, I think, for startup founders that talk about, quick ways to learn Bubble or quick kind of little skills to master to build a proof of concept or an MVP. But what we found was that there was kind of this gap in the market where there wasn't too many courses actually out there that were training people to become Bubble developers. And we felt that the speed and the efficiency Bubble offered as an app to build other applications was quite unique, that there was really kind of a space and a need for more people to learn this no-code sort of program. So that's kind of how Momentum Group came about, and then was the jumping off point for us looking at starting Momentum Academy. And so that's really kind of the backstory, I think, all in all. I'll pass it over to Aaron to share more about Momentum Academy and what that's kind of turned into.
That's great. Thank you, Ryan. Funny story. So Ryan is the one that actually conducted my very first interview with Momentum. And at the time I had, I'd already been building on Bubble for over a year. And even then, so I was like, oh man, they're an agency, like they're one of the top agencies in the Bubble space. I've worked with a couple agencies before, not that large. So when Ryan actually opened up the kimono, so to say, and showed me the back end of what they were working on, I was like, wow, this is like really, really impressive. We went through like documentation, just the application that they were working on. And it really was nothing like I had seen. And I had been in the space for, a good amount of time. I had spent probably maybe half a year looking into different tools to look at learning. But what really impressed me was just the level of complexity that Momentum was working with. And there just seemed to me like, oh, there's a huge opportunity, not only for Bubble, but, to learn alongside this company. Momentum has done a really good job of structuring their education program for our developers, for myself, for everyone involved in the company. And, happy to be here. And it is, and I'm just happy now that were able to come up with this academy and present our learnings because I know from working here, it's really accelerated my development in terms of my skills tenfold in a very short amount of time. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about no code and what the opportunity here is. So one of the goal of the academy is to really provide a more structured arena for learning. So for instance, with my experience, it was, I had been marketing before, I'd been in finance. I even took a couple of years to work in construction. And what I was finding is that, like, I'm trying to learn here and there. And it was, again, relatively unstructured. I signed up for different courses through different providers in the bubble space and in the traditional code space. And what I was seeing was, one, they were either super outdated. And that's a side note, that's a benefit of bubble because they are pushing so many updates so often, frequently, that a lot of the time course providers aren't able to keep up, especially when they're pre-recorded courses. And on top of that, a lot of what I was seeing when the free material or even some of the higher end paid material, they didn't provide me with the complexity I was really looking to learn at the time. So I felt that there was more I can do, and I guess the thinking in programming, in traditional programming, is that, like, the only way to get good is to actually start building. So I went through and I, starting to build different applications, started building for clients. I already had marketing clients at the time, so that was a really smooth introduction for me to actually do paid work. After that, I reached out to several different agencies, subcontracted for them, and eventually, after enough projects and after enough experience, I decided to apply to a full-time role, bubbling, and Momentum was happy to have me on board. So I was very pleased about that. Now, with the actual academy portion, so we really want to be able to take all the things that we're learning. So one thing that I did experience was that even though I'm training, I'm practicing, I'm developing, I'm recording everything that I'm doing too, I still wasn't progressing at the speed that I wanted to. And at Momentum, like, we have really, really talented developers, both with traditional coding experience and just with bubble experience. And what I found was, like, having that community and being involved in that community, or that sort of inner circle of Momentum, taking their learnings from the complex projects that they've worked on in the past and being able to sort of, bring that together into a resource that is available for us was really, really beneficial. I went from basically learning or working on applications where I've maybe spent a maximum of like 100 hours on a project, I think, to my very first project where I walked in, took over a project that had already, I think, about 1,200 developer hours put into it. So it was a big jump in complexity, but thankfully, Momentum is huge on systems, huge on automation, huge on personal development and professional development, that it was easy for me to go through, walk through, get up to pace, and then be able to take over a very complex project that way. Now, why learn no code as opposed to code? Well, this is something I personally struggled with too. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but with learning how to code traditionally, I'm sure anyone who is in the no code space, or at least has been in it for a while, has tried to learn to code in the past, or at least thought about it. And once you actually start getting into the weeds and, setting up your environment, learning how to deploy, almost weeks have gone by, if not months, if not given up. I think I gave up coding probably 3 times throughout my professional career and in university. It's really daunting, right? And what did it for me when I found no code, I looked at AppGyver, then I eventually found Bubble. And the reason I actually stayed with Bubble is because there was no education whatsoever in the entire no code space. I mean, there's some stuff now with AppGyver and other tools, but mainly Bubble was more or less the reigning champ. And after seeing what it was able to do, that's where I decided to be. Now, the benefit of learning no code versus sticking with a traditional programming language in just terms of the learning is the immediate feedback that you're able to get. So I went from like, oh, great, I'm going to build an input field. This is going to be a text field. So, going through and declaring that, writing the HTML or, inputting a front-end library, it was exhausting. I was like, it's been 3 hours and I still don't have an input field. Whereas with Bubble, I can go over to the input field element. I'll drag it onto the screen. If you're using the old engine, if you're using the new engine, then I'd sort of click and pop it in. And then there you go, you have your input field. And that was, 2 seconds. So eventually when I first built that to-do list, or like that, the very first CRUD application that people usually build, I was like, wow, I feel like I've brought something to life. And it was a really good feeling. And it happened literally within the first 2 hours. So that really fueled my one, motivation to continue going. And two, it really showed me that like, oh, there's an opportunity for me to actually build something that I've had. So I've had lots of ideas for different software companies or different features I can implement on a website because I had that marketing background. But every time I wanted to actually build something like that and scoping out the cost to have a developer and having to learn exactly what they're doing before I hired them, it was just getting more and more prohibitive, which is why I decided to stick with this, and I'm gonna try to give it a shot. Now it still wasn't that easy because right after learning how to Bubble and getting that motivation or having that motivation to continue going, it's still difficult. And I was doing it part-time. I was already working, traveling, get home and like exhausted. And then it's now up to me to sit down and actually build projects or actually do tutorials and study the documentation, things like that. And what I've learned from teaching this most recent academy is that when you have that structured environment to go to, you have like a dedicated time to be there and work on projects with someone there to actually help you when you get stuck on something, because that is a sticking point. If you get stuck, you're like, oh, I want to give up on this, or I want to do this at a later date. Whereas with having someone there helping you along past that sticking point and giving you and providing you that instruction really helped the participants in our most recent academy progress a lot faster. So we're about 6 weeks into our intensive academy, our first one. And I was saying to the participants there, I was like, it's incredible how far you've actually come, because they went from having no Bubble knowledge whatsoever. They did have, a programming background, a small programming background, but through those 6 weeks, or through the 6 weeks that we've been building, they were able to go from building a basic to-do app to now they're building a full e-commerce store using reusable elements, using backend workflows. And for me to get to that point where I'm like efficiently using reusable elements, passing information through URL parameters, and doing all these advanced things with Bubble, it took me almost a year to get there, whereas they're now at that point within 6 months. So for me, I really wish there was an opportunity like this when I was first learning, because I can only imagine how much further I would be at this point in my journey. Still early days, so there's still opportunity, but that's sort of where we want, and what we see with our academy program is to take people like myself, like Milan, like Ryan, who are aspiring developers, and put them on the fast track to be able to get where they want to be. Now, with no code as well, there is sorry, there was a little pop-up that came there. With no code as well, there is opportunities within the greater environment too, because it's fun to learn how to program. It's fun to build applications, but at the end of the day, it's a job, it's a career. You need to put food on the table. So what is the business opportunity with no code? Now, because Bubble itself, and we're just talking about Bubble for now, because it's so flexible and it's so open-ended, you can almost do anything. And that was a little bit of a hurdle for me when I first started was, oh, it's like a no-code tool. Like I'm probably not going to be able to do all the things that I want to do. When in reality, like as soon as you get like a couple layers deep into Bubble, like, oh man, like there's so much opportunity. I can do basically anything that you would be able to do with traditional programming. And it's all wrapped in a nice little package, but it doesn't keep you in that package. Like I've been on the forum for a while looking through, and a lot of things that I see, or one thing that I have seen talked about over and over again is the black box of Bubble. And to an extent, that thinking is right, but it is still completely open-ended. Like we're working on a project right now where we're connecting an AWS S3 bucket for additional storage. We have an application where we're using multiple databases, other programming technologies to augment our functionality in that one Bubble application. So there really is no limit. So it's not particularly a black box. If you want a new backend or you want a separate backend, you can do that. If you want separate storage, you can do that. If you want Bubble to be a layer in your production, you can, and it really is that flexible. So with that being said, there is a huge business opportunity. One, because the big thing that Bubble promotes is building MVPs. Now, building MVPs is, I'm not quite an expert in it. I've done quite a few, but it's hard, right? It's hard to figure out, one, what do I need to build for my first version? Is this even the right features that I need to build? And there's no way of knowing that without actually trying. And what Bubble does or gives you a superpower is, I can now build, a proof of concept within a week. I can build a proof of concept within a day if I want. Like it depends on what you're including in that first version. But the importance is the speed, not only the speed of getting that first version out, but the speed of iteration, right? Because we're building a startup. We want to be able to build something that people actually want. People are actually going to be using. And the only way to really determine that is to get it into the hands of your users. Now with Bubble, because we can build so fast and we can iterate so quickly, as soon as it gets in the hands of our users, we're tracking it, the same way that you would track analytics through a traditional application. We're seeing our results and we're making business decisions off of that. So if, a particular cohort of users is not finding a feature useful, we could rapidly change and iterate to build something that they could potentially find useful. So that really gives you a superpower. And when you're comparing a traditional coding company, let's say all things being equal, a traditional coding company, and a Bubble company, that Bubble company will win in terms of speed. Now, in terms of like other things, the debate's open for that. But in terms of pure speed, unless you have a 10x developer on that one developer team, that Bubble team will always push features quickly. They'll push features quicker, which again is a huge benefit, especially when you're competing or in the same space. Like I said, all things being equal. Now, because people are now really building real businesses with Bubble, there is also the opportunity for a new career, right? For me, I wanted to build my own products. I wanted to at first be a product manager. I was going to be a non-technical product manager at the time, but now with Bubble and my knowledge there, you can be the actual developer and the one to actually produce your application. So there are quite a few businesses running on Bubble. We have a couple of businesses here who have accepted major investment, upwards of 7 figures. And there are other Bubble built applications in the space that have bigger businesses than that and have accepted more funding than the ones we've worked with. So there is a growing opportunity. I've seen a lot of talks on the forum with job opportunities upwards of 6 figures in US dollars. So there is that space is growing. That space is growing, and if you get in early, as with anything, you'll be able to ride that wave to the top, right? So I definitely do recommend learning no code if you do want to enter the programming space in the future, because there's a bunch of articles there. I won't quote any here, but there's a need for more software, if you can believe it, in the future, and most of that software will be built with no code for sure. And the last opportunity with no code is really the democratization of software. And I think that was Bubble's, that was their driving force when they first started, right? Democratizing access to software, because it does seem like there's a gilded cage around the ability to code. Like only 3% of the world's population can code. And it's, we use it every day. We interact with it every single day. And it always seemed like, only if I had access. There was like almost no way to get there. You didn't know how anything works, or you don't know how anything works. And it just seemed like you had to be super, super smart to even get to that space. To be a good bubbler, it is programming. It's not easy to learn. And you can do anything you can, or most things that traditional programmers can't do. So you do have to be quite a proficient programmer to be able to be a good bubbler. But it does shorten that learning curve from being like a basic developer to being a more advanced developer or programmer. Bubble does a really good job of doing that. And what I've seen from my time in the space is that there's a huge population of bubblers in Brazil. So there's opportunities for Brazilians, and we have a brilliant Brazilian developer on our team. But there are, I think that's the second largest country of bubblers next to the US. So there's a ton of opportunity in emerging markets there. I know in Nigeria, we have a designer from Nigeria. I've worked with several developers from Nigeria in my past, and there's a huge opportunity there. It really makes building complex software available for everyone. And I think that is overarching the most important thing. And to be able to be a part of that and help teach these skills to anyone who is available to learn it makes me feel good, and I'm really glad to be part of that journey, because Bubble's goal of bringing software to everyone, I think, is super noble. But yeah, so now specifically about Momentum Academy, and what we're going to be learning here is that we want to be able to teach you basically from having very little or having some Bubble knowledge to becoming advanced bubbler where you could be bubbling full time. Now, we talk about designing and building scalable web platforms. So a lot of our apps that we have worked on, they're live, they have users, they're generating income. I think one of our larger clients, they're on track to do around 2.3 million in Australian dollars, but in revenue this year, that's a real business. So it needs to be stable, it needs to be scalable, it needs to be secure. So that is one of our big pillars here: scalable, secure, and stable, secure. We also have a good opportunity to learn with industry partners. So we have guest lecturers that can come in, talk about more traditional programming. So like JavaScript. That is something that we are, as a agency, doing more and more, is injecting traditional code into our applications to increase performance and to stability, and just to provide additional more advanced features to our apps. With the Academy, you'll also be able to build projects that are meaningful, that can be used in your portfolio. So not the same Instagram with Bubble type of app, or Fiverr with Bubble Marketplace, which is a huge one. We're talking now really advanced applications. So I think our capstone project for our next intensive is going to be a multi-tenanted SaaS where you'll have your master application with sub applications. You'll be able to push changes, customize those sub applications, really working and building from the ground up. And that's something that is not done a lot. Like sub ups are not even used a lot in the bubble community for a few reasons, but that is something that you can add to your portfolio that's really going to show potential clients if you're a freelancer, or potential employers that you do have the chops to be at the upper tier of the developers on your potential bubble team. And it helps put you at the cutting edge of technology, because no code is probably going to be the most used programming tool in the future, just because the reasons I mentioned before. And it also opens the opportunities for to work all around the world, right? I'm located just outside of Toronto in Hamilton, in Canada, and the Momentum team is in Sydney, right? And Milan is in the US, and I work with a gentleman in the UK, and it really it's been interesting learning from or working with people all around the world. Now with our next program, we'll be running it. Oops, sorry about that. So we'll be running our next cohort starting in May. So that will be a program that runs 3 days a week, 3 hours a day. I've skipped ahead quite a bit. So I'll circle back, but with the, sorry about that, some technical difficulties. But yeah, so with the intensive course coming up, so we spend the first few weeks just talking about the basics, and then we go into that capstone project that I talked about. Again, that's something that you won't find anywhere else in the bubble education space. And yeah, so when you're done with our academy, you'll be able to go and apply for jobs. We're always looking for advanced developers, so you'll have a space here. And yeah, and if you don't decide to work for a company, you always have the skills to build something on your own that will be fairly complex. Great, and that's everything that I have for you guys today. So I guess we'll open it up to questions now.